Alrighty, guys, welcome to Chat with the Brewer Live. We are live at Wooden Legs Brewing Company here in Brookings, South Dakota. My name is Seth, but nobody cares what my name is. You all know me. We've got our very special guest tonight, and look at this. You're not even on a computer at this point. You're live in person. We can prove we know you. You can prove that you stand here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? We've got a number of people kind of floating around the pub here, and then we already have a couple of viewers online. So why don't you introduce yourself, what brewing company you're from, and then we'll get into try some of these awesome beers.
Thanks for having me. My name's Dustin Brau from Brau Brothers Brewing Company right across the border. This is one of the closest beer events I've ever done. It's awesome having you guys to the west. And so we've been 1999 actually, and went through a couple different buildings, and now we're in Marshall, Minnesota. So what are we, about an hour away?
I think, yeah, about an hour away. So for those of you online, you're the first person I can ever confirm that has actually worn pants to this interview. I hope that's a trend. We're on episode 3 or 4, but for sure the first one with pants. Now, you brought a couple beers over. The nice thing about you guys being local is these came in the back of the truck. These were fresh from the brewery today. I want to hear more about Brau Brothers because I think they're kind of a staple here in our area. But I don't want to talk too much without getting some beers in us here. So why don't you describe at least let's start with the Smash here. I think this is the one that is brand new to what we do.
Smash is, and I have to give a shout out to the Homebrew Club in Marshall, Minnesota, which is called Smash, Southwest Minnesota Academic Society for Homebrewers. And so we got together with them one night, and it got kind of late into the night, but we brewed a Smash beer. It's all Simcoe. It's all 2-row. It's about just over 7.2, 7.3. So a slightly bigger beer would probably qualify as an IPA, but it's signature Simcoe.
So that you can taste the Simcoe, and then why don't you help maybe some of our viewers and people in the pub understand what Smash is? Like, are you using a single malt and single hop in this as well?
Yep, that's exactly right. It was a basic 2-row out of the silo, and we did use Simcoe at about, and this is out from memory, but about 5 different places during the brewing process, and so it got a heavy dose of dry hop.
Excellent here. And now, for those of you sitting around the bar, we'll have Ange pour a couple samples of this. This is fantastic, as you can really sense both the bitterness of the Simcoe they must have used in the boil, and then some of the dry hop, as you mentioned. Very, very good beer. Let's try the next one here. Now, this one is probably the first beer that we've had from you guys that comes in a firkin, or actually in a pin. It's a cask condition beer. Why don't you go ahead and tell our viewers and our people in here what cask condition is and why this is a different beer than maybe some of the other ones on draft.
This beer is cask condition, so it's a throwback way of serving, producing beer. It goes into a cask, into a firkin, into a goofy-looking roundish keg. Gets aged kind of naturally. Powered under its own yeast, under its own sugar, and a lot of times the fun thing about cask conditioning is you can put whatever you want in it. So you can make individual casks with everything from vanilla bean, nuts, coffee, cocoa, spices, oak. You can put just about anything into a cask. So you can truly make one-off beers in. I think we did 2 pins of this, and that was about it.
So you're telling me if you can buy it at Hy-Vee, it can end up in a cask.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's kind of how we do it too. Whatever looks good on the shelf goes into a firkin.
Well, Dustin, we've tried some of the beers. I'm gonna have the pub keeps pour some around. A big shout out to the ladies group that's in the pub tonight. You're not watching online. We have a whole crew of beer ladies here. Maybe we'll let you guys introduce your new program a little later in the show. But what I want to know, Dustin, is you are probably one of the closest, maybe second closest brewery here to Brookings. You guys are over in Marshall now. When did you start? How can our viewers find you? What are some of your regular beers? Just want to know the story of Brau Brothers.
We started brewing in 1999 commercially, and the beer outlook was a little bit different than it is now. Back then, so it was kind of brutal finding some good beers, craft beer. I want to say there were maybe 12, 13, 14 breweries in Minnesota. Right now, there's right around 70. So it's a different atmosphere. Definitely a lot better. It's good time to be a craft beer drinker.
Now the label says, where were you from originally? I think that's kind of the fun part of the story. Is there was, if I remember right, there's 220 people as it's claimed on the label.
That's a bald-faced lie. We put 220 on there in case the city ever grew, which it didn't really do. But it was it was somewhere in the 190s, but we didn't want to have to change the logo. So we always went with 220. And
hopeless optimism.
Yeah.
that's absolutely great. Now, is that building still being used or you guys are in Marshall now, and from what I remember, you're in an old Runnings building.
Yep.
Which is the size of the university when I went in there. But you're in a Runnings building, but the building for previous building, what's that being used for?
You know, it's a little bit of storage, but we still grow the hops there. We still grow barley there. So we kind of use that building as a first stop for hops, barley, before it heads over to Marshall to the brewery.
Now, excellent. The brewery, of course, is Brau Brothers, and I would imagine you're one of the many. Tell us about how many brothers you got working on this. Has it always been a family affair?
It has, for the most part. I have an older brother and a younger brother. They both have day jobs where they actually make money. My younger brother's a computer programmer. My older brother's in communications. But they help out quite a bit in those areas, as well as logistics, planning, elbow work, things like that. And so it is truly a family brewery.
So 15 years ago, no, 1999, 16 years ago. Wow, that's crazy. And we've got a couple of your other beers here that we're going to try, but you've actually went into a sour program as well, and I think one of the local beers one of the beers that our local contingent likes is probably the 100-Yard Dash. I know that's seasonal, and maybe the viewers online would like to understand kind of why it is a 100-Yard Dash and when they can get it.
Originally, when we were in Lucan, we did our fresh hop ale as a true fresh hop estate beer. So we pulled the hops out of the hop yard, which was almost exactly 100 yards from the boil kettle. So it was kind of a couple beers one night, and the name just popped out. And it's always been one of our more sought after beers, I guess you'd call it, just because it's kind of unique. There's not a whole lot of estate hop yards around here.
And we had that at the pub here this year, and it was great. It had a lot of the green hop flavors. I think, Bank's doing a green hop beer, has one in the queue. So there's a lot of good beers coming out of Minnesota. I think one that a lot of our patrons here may have started with. You probably were the first beer in this region that people really picked up and said, "Oh, it's local." Is probably the Moo Juice. That's a beer that's probably been along for a long time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Moo Juice and why that one's so popular?
Moo Juice is an oatmeal milk stout, roughly 10% lactose sugar, roughly 10% oats in two different versions. And that's our best seller. About 40% of what we produce year-round is Moo Juice. And so it kind of surprised us because we're a little brewery in a rural part of Minnesota that your best seller is a stout. But we've always ran with it.
So Moo Juice is joined in the flagship series by Ben Krieger we've had here before. We've also had, I think one of my favorites is the Ring Neck we've had before. Yep. What are the other favorites?
South Dakota.
You said probably South Dakota. That's exactly where it comes from. You've probably seen the favorites change through the last 16 years. Or is they always kind of stuck with the same ones?
I don't know if you do this, but I always like whatever I'm brewing that's new. I go back to the oldies, the classics, but if I just came out with, we just did a pale ale with topaz hops, and it's gluten-free, but it's all wheat and barley. Now that's my new favorite. We did Vienna Lager for the tap room. Now that's my new favorite. We did a Bock for the tap room as well. Now that's my new favorite. So whatever we come out with, I can hopscotch just like every other craft brewer on the face of the planet.
I think we're a culture that has an undiagnosed form of ADD. Whatever is in the grain tub is going to go into a beer, and then we love it. So the change that you've seen, I think that's kind of interesting, is that 16 years ago, there you are as a small brewery in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, just as we are nowhere, South Dakota. Yep. How did that start? I mean, what pushed you, what compelled you to step over the ledge there and say, we are going to make a brewery here in a hometown of 190, 200 if there's a bus driving through people?
We, back in the day, my wife and I, we graduated from at then SSU, now SMSU, with hotel restaurant degrees. And we bought a little restaurant in Lucan. We were going to stay close. Both of our families are from the area. And so we needed a niche. I hate to call it a shtick, but we needed something to get people to drive to Lucan to drink our beer. Or to eat our food, actually. And so we came up with a really small brewery. Remember, this was in '99, so it was a little unique at the time. And And it really worked. You know, what we found is, even back then, there were craft beer drinkers kind of hiding in the woodworks, and once you gave them a place to go, then they went out and drank craft beer, and it just kind of blossomed along with that. And then Minnesota had some backwards brewing laws, and so as they changed, it made it a little bit more of a friendly place for breweries like us. And so we were kind of able to grow with not only with the industry, but with the laws of the state.
So there was a number of people, and I remember coming to visit your tap room. Boy, it must have been 10 years ago almost. We're over there, and there's been a lot of people since there through. But you couldn't possibly have sold all of the beers in the tap room. Tell us about your distribution. You distribute, of course, in Minnesota, South Dakota. Where are the other places that people can find your beer?
Basically the upper Midwest. So we go as far east as Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Dakotas, or at least part of the Dakotas, and then down to Iowa and Omaha, Nebraska. That's pretty much our territory.
So you got the kind of the I-29 corridor sorted out.
Basically.
So hotel and restaurant is your trade. I know at the new place in Marshall you have a lot bigger kitchen, more commitment to that. Tell me a little bit about that, and I imagine that's a dream come true to be able to put that together.
In some ways, it's fun to go back to the restaurant part of the business, and in some ways, like at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday when your keg blows and you're at home and you have to come up and change it, it's kind of back to the old brewing or restaurant industry. No, we actually really enjoy it, and it really helps us as a brewery because it gives people another reason to stop into the tap room. It also gives us a reason to keep our tap room open at hours that we otherwise wouldn't keep it open.
Offers a little bit of flexibility. It seems beer and food kind of fit together hand in hand. We're going to open it up for questions on the floor here. We're filling up here. We may have to get close to ask those. So if you guys got a question for Dustin, you guys can make your way on up here. So the question, you've got questions. I see questions in the background. There's giddy excitement. Come here, Cassie. You're going to want to ask a question here. Come over to this side here, Cassie. Everybody's gonna talk. All right, Cassie's gonna ask the icebreaker here. Here you go, Cassie.
Can I whisper it in your ear and you ask it? Oh, dang it. Okay.
Look, Cassie, you're live on the internet.
Oh my God, I don't like this. This is not fun. So you guys have done the Scotch Ale Sour, right?
Yep.
And that first came around as an accident, right?
Maybe.
So
all of our beers are purely intentional.
Yeah, ours too. So how do you control that infection now that you've kind of started producing more of it? I mean, it's such a dangerous thing for such a small brewery to have. How do you control that?
You know, the biggest problem, or the reason Bon Craigie Sour came about, that's a beer you're talking about. We were going to do Bon Craigie Sour. It had 5 times the smoked malt that goes in regular Bon Craigie. So we thought we'd do this cool, smoky, barrel-aged beer, and it would blend together perfectly. We put it in barrels, put it in a warehouse in Lucan. It was about 100 degrees all that summer. That beer probably stayed at 90 degrees all summer. And we had no hope of keeping it the way we wanted it.
So you made an incubator then?
That's exactly right. And so once we noticed it starting to go a direction that we didn't want it to go, then it was hurry up and inoculate it with things that we kind of hope will salvage it. And then, of course, just like every cool mistake in a brewery, it just ended up good, and we ended up liking the mix.
So then my question for you is, how long did it take you to do it again?
That's a tough one. Finding a 95-degree warehouse is kind of tough in Minnesota. But actually, now we have 1,600 square feet totally set aside for sour aging and Brett. It's cordoned off from the rest of the brewery, so we can play around with it a little bit. The only challenge to that is that room sits at a kind of a constant 60 degrees year round, and so we'd have to play with some temperature control. Maybe find a place in a warehouse or in our warehouse where we can hide some kegs and build that temperature back up.
That puts a pretty good question on it. Do you see the trend going towards sours and those types of beers? Or, I mean, there's always the big hop beers, there's the fresh beers, but is sour the next thing that's going to happen on the I-29 corridor here?
Absolutely, and here's what we see. People who don't like traditional malt and hop beers like Sheephead or Bon Craigie or something like that will like a lighter, well, not even a lighter, but lighter in texture and body because of the increased alcohol content or the dryness of it. But something tart and maybe like a sweet and sour type of flavor in a beer. It's really unique. A lot of beer drinkers who might not otherwise pick up a 750 will pick up a 750 or something like that. it blows us away how much of the Bon Craigie sour we moved in the tap room and by growler and 750s out of Marshall, Minnesota, a town that's, very good for craft beer, but, sours are new to this area, so it really surprised us. It's something that we're taking a second look at, definitely.
I think we've noticed some of that here is that we have something that we really love and people are like, it's, and then we have something that we're proud of, but it may not be our favorite, and all of a sudden it just disappears, it evaporates. So
yep,
I think we've got a couple more questions. Toby, I think you had a question here. I'll have to have you stand up so the people of the internet can see you, Toby. You're probably gonna have to duck down because I am people of the internet. He's on a box. I am not really this.
You talked a little about how there's a difference sort of between when you started your brewery and sort of starting breweries now. I'm curious what you think would be different about the way you'd go about starting a brewery today versus starting one 15 years ago.
I think 15 years ago it was all about logistics. Like, how do you do it? And there wasn't Google to kind of tell you how to do it. So you had to, screw up everything before you got it right. Nowadays, to be honest, it's a little bit more about getting your message out and marketing and telling people who you are. Now there are, somebody told me, 30 breweries in the production in the planning in Minnesota. So how are you going to get your message out when there are 30 other breweries that are doing the exact same thing? Back then, it was all about, geez, can you even do it without infecting everything? And can you run that down the drain? And where do you even find a valve that looks like that? Nowadays, it's you can. The supply side of it is kind of caught up a little bit, so you can go out and get all the stuff you need. Now, can you sell it? Do you have a following? Can you get people to drink your beer? Not just the first time, but the second and third times. So that's the biggest difference.
So there probably wasn't things like Google Hangout back in the day to talk to everyone on the internet at the same time. Well, on a personal regard, thank you very much for coming out here. We appreciate it. As I said, you guys are probably some of the first craft beer that the city of Brookings got hooked into, and I know we've done our best to support you guys as well as you can. We love the small brewers. We're going to see if there's any more questions. Did you? Here's more questions. I knew there would be more questions. We have a lot of questions here. You are also standing on a box.
Hi, Richard Drawdy.
You're not going to ask me what the alpha amylase content is of Vienna malt or anything, are you?
No, I would like to ask you, what is your opinion today about collaborations, and do you think that will continue? Yeah.
I have mixed emotions about brewery collaborations. I like them because it really shows us in a good light as an industry. The fact that competing breweries get together and make beers together, you don't see that anywhere else. So that's a good thing. Plus, the beers that they make when they do collaborations tend to be really good. So selfishly, I just like to drink them. What I'm interested in right now is doing collaborations with places that aren't breweries. Like Lobster or our milk sugar that goes in Moo Juice is from up by
Lake Norton,
Litchfield, Minnesota. So things like that. When we do collaborations, it's nice to do a collaboration with the brewery, but to go outside the box and find a local producer that kind of helps integrate you with your local community. I really like that, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. Got a couple projects in the works, kind of close to Marshall, close to Southwest Minnesota that we're working on. But to be honest, as I travel, I go to some other breweries, and in my mind I'm thinking, you guys do a good job. I'd love to make a beer with you guys. Well, just like you guys, or down here, find a beer that you like and say, gosh, we should incorporate. I don't want to steal this from you, but we could work together and put together some ideas and come up with something cool. So that's nice. I just think the whole idea of being close as an industry is really neat. We're in the Craft Brewers Guild in Minnesota, and the fact that you can get together with a bunch of other brewers and talk and sit and have beers and go over what do you do versus what do you do. I never knew this existed. Well, how do you do that? That's I wish that existed in 1999. That was a long answer.
That was a good answer. A good answer. So when we sat around home brewing, I know Rich and I, we've had a number of your beers as we tried to make brews at our house. What beers did you drink back in the 90s that made you say, this is like, did you, you know, they always ask, like, on MTV, who's your inspiration? Like, this band, it's always in the inside cover, this band is inspired by somebody. Who was your inspirations?
You know, my inspiration beers are very different than inspiration beers today. First of all, you know, let's get that right off the... Back then, Honker's Ale by Goose Island. Revolutionary groundbreaking beer. Pale Ale we could get in Lucan, Minnesota. That blew our minds. Liney's Creamy Dark back in the day. You know, it was not Guinness, but it was dark, and it had some flavor. Boy, that was pretty slim back then. Well, all the Shell's beers. You know, Shell's
there you go. They're right around the corner from you.
Yeah,
yep.
They're about an hour from us, and so they were doing all malt beers back then. So that was clearly we kind of consider that brewery our big brother brewery.
Excellent, excellent. I think we might have time for at least one more questions from the crowd here. Uh-oh. I think here, this is, well, maybe we'll let you introduce yourself to the internet. This is Girls Pint Out. And I'm going to leave it at that. And you can tell Dustin and the entire internet what Girls Pint Out is and how it got started here.
Girls Pint Out is an organization, nonprofit women's organization for women who love craft beer that was started in Indiana in 2010. And we, Brookings, South Dakota, is the first official South Dakota chapter. So we have wooden legs filled with women who love craft beer tonight. And I guess for me, just coming from a woman's standpoint, I started out the first beer that wasn't a Keystone Light, Bud Light, or a Miller Light, or a Coors Light, for me was a Guinness.
Michelob Golden Draft Light for Minnesota people.
And I realized that dark beer was so much more inviting than I ever thought it was. So as a woman, you know, maybe who's new and is just coming into this craft beer world, do you have any advice for them? And how do you see women changing the skew of the craft beer world?
To be honest, I think it's already changed. I think it's done. So when we started brewing in '99, I go to a beer festival, and it was a lot of guys, a few gals, and if a girl walked up to you and said, "Give me your hoppiest beer," you just about fell over. That was back in '99. Now go to a beer festival, totally even. In fact, it might even skew the other way. I think the idea of different taste buds being, you know, based on sex, I think that's done. I really do. But, you know, and really in the tap room we see this. You know, and we can get direct feedback that way, which is kind of nice for us. So it's groups like yours are great because they help kind of change the mindset a little bit. It's not, you know, hoppy beers, dark beers. It's not this. We got to get away from thinking we're brewing this beer for this specific group of people and that beer for that specific group of people. And you know, based on what I see and based on the way it used to be, totally different. And you know, you've got there's a group over by Mankato, very similar, and they do a great job of promoting beer and getting together. And I think it's awesome because it makes our industry bigger, which selfishly again is good for us. But it also just kind of changes what we have to produce and who we're producing for, and it kind of just expands the palette, you know, in a kind of a general sense of beer drinkers. So more power to you, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I actually, from going to Guinness, I came over to your Moo Juice, which was, you know, right up there, top notch. And I didn't start drinking IPAs until I started working for Seth here at Wooden Legs Brewing Company. And now I'm enjoying one of your Smash IPAs because my palate has changed just in having the opportunities to try more. So, you know, thank you for helping to educate people as we come in to your tap room as well.
No, thank you. The hardest step to take when drinking craft beer is the first step. Just putting that first beer that isn't what you've drank for drunk for the last 10 years. Just doing that. Once you start it, it's a snowball effect.
You're a man after my own heart because you also live in a college city, so there is some similarities in demographic there. The one question that we always ask right before we get over with this, for anybody that's watched the previous episodes, is as a brewer and somebody in the industry, if somebody here is looking to get into the industry, if they want to work in a tap room, if they want to become a brewer, what lasting words of advice would you grant them?
Follow me home. We need brewers.
There you go. There you go. It's over in Marshall. There's job openings right now. So there you go, guys. Thank you from everybody down here at Wooden Legs. Let's give Dustin a round of applause. Thanks for coming out, Dustin. Thank you here. We're gonna go off air because anybody that's watching on the internet, they can go fend for themselves. We're gonna go by and try some more of your great beers here. So I appreciate it, sir. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks
and thanks for everybody else. We'll do this every Monday night, but tonight, let's go drink beers.